I discovered the flash drive while cleaning out our garage, wedged behind a stack of old tax returns. Small, black, unmarked. I almost tossed it in the electronic waste pile. Would have been easier if I had. My name is Marcus Reeves, 38, forensic accountant for the FBI's white-collar crime division. I've spent my career following paper trails, mapping connections others miss, finding patterns in the chaos of numbers. Ironic that I missed the pattern in my own home for a decade. I plugged the drive into my laptop that evening while Elise was at her book club, just curious what might be on it. Maybe old vacation photos or work documents I'd forgotten about. The folder structure was innocuous. Family Photos 2013. Inside were indeed photos, but not of our family. They showed Elise sitting across from a gray-haired man in an upscale restaurant, their hands intertwined on the table. Another, Elise entering a hotel, the man's hand on the small of her back. Dozens more spanning what appeared to be several months. The final folder contained a video file. I hesitated, then clicked play. The footage was from a hotel room. The man from the photos sat on the bed, Elise pacing in front of him. "I told you, Richard, this isn't sustainable," she was saying. "Marcus suspects nothing, but we need to be careful. One wrong move and everything falls apart." Richard, my boss, the man who'd mentored me for 8 years, attended our anniversary dinners, held our newborn daughter. The man who had promoted me last month with a handshake and couldn't think of anyone better for the job. I watched the entire 46-minute video. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners in something larger. Elise mentioned the operation, discussed moving the funds, referenced the others. My wife and my boss were running some kind of scheme, and I, the forensic accountant, was their unwitting cover. I didn't confront Elise that night when she returned, cheeks flushed from wine and laughter. I didn't call Richard and demand answers. That's not how I operate. In my line of work, you gather evidence methodically. You build a case brick by brick until the wall is impenetrable. So I copied the drive, returned it exactly where I'd found it, and began my investigation. First, I needed context. How long had this been happening? I took a day off work, claiming a stomach bug. While Elise was at her job as an investment advisor at Monarch Financial, I searched our house. In the back of her closet, beneath a false bottom in her jewelry box, the one I'd given her for our 5th anniversary, I found a burner phone and a small notebook with dates, locations, and what appeared to be code names. One entry caught my eye. M promotion secured. Timetable accelerated. My promotion had been part of their plan. But why? That night, I logged into our home network and checked the security logs. A precaution I'd set up years ago and promptly forgotten about. The logs showed Elise accessing my work laptop regularly when I wasn't home, usually between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. What was she looking for in the dead of night? I installed a keylogger on our home computer the next day. Within a week, I had her passwords, email, banking, cloud storage. The picture that emerged was both clearer and more disturbing than I'd anticipated. Elise wasn't just having an affair with Richard. They'd known each other before I'd met either of them. Their relationship predated our marriage by at least 2 years. Richard had introduced us at a company function, encouraged our relationship, stood as my best man at our wedding. And now I understood why. My job gave me access to sensitive financial data. My new promotion meant I oversaw fraud investigations for the Northeast region, investigations that could potentially uncover their operation. By marrying me, Elise had positioned herself as the perfect inside woman. In her private email account, I found messages to Richard discussing how to redirect my attention away from certain cases. "Marcus is looking at the Brunswick file," she wrote in one. I suggested he focus on Westlake instead, more likely to yield results and advance his career. Brunswick, the case I'd abandoned 6 months ago because it seemed to lead nowhere. I pulled the file from my secure home office. Looking at it with fresh eyes, I saw what I'd missed before. The shell companies, the transfer patterns, they matched exactly what I was now finding in Elise and Richard's communications. 10 years. 10 years of my life built on a foundation of lies. Our daughter, Emma, now 7, with her mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. Had she been part of the plan too? A way to cement me in place? My first instinct was to confront Elise, to demand the truth. But the accountant in me knew better. Evidence first. Complete picture. Then action. I took a week of vacation time and told Elise I was attending a financial crimes conference in Denver. Instead, I rented an office across town under a false name and began rebuilding the Brunswick investigation, connecting it to other cases I'd worked over the years. The pattern that emerged was staggering. A network of shell companies, strategic bankruptcies, and manipulated audits across 6 states. Conservative estimate: $40 million diverted over 12 years. The operation had started before I met Elise, but it had accelerated after our marriage. My position had provided them with intelligence, early warnings about investigations, access to protected information. And I had been entirely blind to it. I found 7 other people involved. 3 I knew personally, colleagues Richard had introduced me to over the years. One was Elise's supposed college roommate, Sarah, who had been Emma's godmother. Our entire social circle had been constructed around their operation. I needed more concrete evidence before taking this to the FBI. I couldn't walk in with accusations against my own wife and boss based on a flash drive I'd found by chance. They'd question my judgment, my competence, my complicity. I needed irrefutable proof. The opportunity came when Elise mentioned Richard and his wife were hosting their annual lake house weekend. "Emma's excited about swimming," she said casually over dinner. "And Sarah's bringing her new boyfriend." The gathering of conspirators all in one place. I made my preparations carefully. "You know, I've been thinking," I told Elise the night before the trip. "Why don't you and Emma go ahead on Friday? I'll wrap up some work and drive up Saturday morning." She tried to hide her relief. "If you're sure. I know how much you hate leaving projects unfinished." "Some things can't wait," I said, smiling. "But this can." After they left Friday afternoon, I put my plan into motion. First, I called Agent Lowell, an old academy friend now working in internal investigations. "Don, I need a confidential meeting. I've uncovered something big, but I need your eyes on it before it goes official." Next, I drove to the lake house, not to the main entrance, but to the service road that ran behind the property. I'd studied satellite images, property maps, utility layouts. Richard's security system was top of the line, but I knew its blind spots. I'd helped him choose it 3 years ago. I waited until nightfall, then made my way through the woods to the back of the property. Through the windows, I could see them all gathered in the great room. Elise, Richard, Sarah, and 4 others I recognized from my investigation. They were laughing, drinking, celebrating something. My daughter was nowhere to be seen, probably asleep upstairs. I circled to Richard's home office, a separate structure connected to the main house by a covered walkway. The security keypad required a 6-digit code. I tried the combination Richard always used, his college jersey number repeated, 237237. The lock clicked open. Inside, I planted the micro cameras and audio recorders I'd acquired through a former colleague now working in private security. Not strictly legal, but neither was what they were doing. I also connected a small device to Richard's desktop that would clone his hard drive remotely. By morning, I'd have everything I needed. I retreated to my car and waited, monitoring the feeds from the cameras. Around midnight, Richard entered his office alone. He poured himself a scotch, sat at his desk, and made a phone call. "Everything's proceeding as planned," he said to whoever was on the other end. "Marcus has no idea. With his new position, we'll have complete visibility into the task force's operations." He paused, listening. "Yes, Elise has handled him perfectly. 10 years without suspicion. She deserves a bonus for that performance." I watched the rest of the conversation, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. When Richard finally returned to the main house, I continued monitoring. At 1:30 a.m., Elise slipped into the office. She accessed Richard's computer using a password I'd never seen her use before, downloaded something to a flash drive similar to the one I'd found, then carefully restored the computer to its previous state. Professional, methodical, a woman I didn't recognize despite sharing a bed with her for a decade. By dawn, I had hours of incriminating conversations, evidence of financial transactions, plans for future operations, and most importantly, a clear picture of their network. I drove back to the city and met Don Lowell at a diner off the highway. "This better be good, Marcus," he said, sliding into the booth. "You look like hell." "It's good," I replied, sliding a flash drive across the table. "But you're not going to like it." Don reviewed the evidence in silence, his face growing grimmer by the minute. Finally, he looked up. "How long have you known?" 10 days, I said. "But they've been running this for at least 12 years. Your wife, central to the operation." Don ran a hand over his face. "Jesus, Marcus, this implicates half a dozen people in our office. We'll need to bring in OIG and possibly Treasury. This can't go through normal channels." "I know. That's why I came to you first." "What about your daughter?" The question I'd been avoiding. "She knows nothing. She's innocent in all this." Don nodded. "We'll need to move quickly. Once we start making arrests, they'll destroy evidence." "I have a plan for that too," I said. The next morning, I drove to the lake house as planned. Elise greeted me with a kiss. "You missed a great dinner last night," she said. Emma ran to me and I scooped her up, holding her tightly. "Did you finish your work, Daddy?" she asked. "Almost, sweetheart," I said. "Just a little more to do." Richard clapped me on the shoulder. "The workaholic arrives. Come on, we're about to take the boats out." I smiled and followed them down to the dock, where the others were waiting. We spent the day on the lake, swimming, fishing, laughing as if nothing was wrong. I watched Elise and Richard, their subtle glances, the careful distance they maintained in public. Consummate performers. As the sun began to set, Richard's wife Caroline announced dinner would be ready soon. "Marcus, would you mind opening some wine?" she asked. "You know where Richard keeps the good stuff." "Happy to," I said, heading toward the house. In the wine cellar, I sent a text message. "Now." 15 minutes later, as we were all seated around the long dining table, the sound of vehicles approaching came from the front of the house. Richard frowned. "Are we expecting anyone else?" Before anyone could answer, the front door opened, and Don Lowell entered, flanked by 6 agents. "Richard Pierce," he announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice." He continued reading rights as other agents moved around the table, detaining Sarah, the others, and finally Elise. Richard's wife Caroline looked bewildered. Like me, she'd been kept in the dark. Our eyes met across the table, and I saw my own pain reflected there. "Marcus," Elise said, her voice cold as the agents handcuffed her. "What have you done?" I stood slowly. "My job," I replied. The next few hours were chaos. Emma cried, confused and frightened. I held her, promising everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure how. Caroline sat stunned in an armchair as agents searched the house. I stayed with them while the others were taken away. Don approached me as things quieted down. "We found evidence of 3 more conspirators not present today. Treasury's already freezing accounts. This is bigger than we thought." "What happens now?" I asked. "Interviews, indictments, probably a task force. We'll need your testimony." He hesitated. "It's going to get ugly, Marcus. Trial, media attention. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Emma, now asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying. "Do I have a choice? You could distance yourself. Say you just uncovered it. No one would blame you." I shook my head. "No, I need to see this through. For Emma. For me." The aftermath was as difficult as Don had predicted. Elise refused to see me or speak to me except through attorneys. Richard attempted to implicate me, claiming I'd been aware of their activities. The investigation expanded, eventually identifying 15 people involved in the scheme and recovering nearly $30 million in diverted funds. 6 months after the arrests, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Elise enter a guilty plea as part of a deal with prosecutors. She would serve 8 years. Richard and 2 others were fighting the charges. facing potential sentences of 20 years or more. The media coverage was relentless. FBI agent's wife at center of massive fraud. Marriage of deception. How a criminal enterprise infiltrated the FBI. Reporters camped outside my house until I moved Emma to a smaller place across town. My colleagues treated me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. How could I not have known? Was I really that blind? Or was I somehow complicit? Internal investigations cleared me of wrongdoing, but the whispers persisted. One evening, a year after the arrests, I received a letter from the federal detention center where Elise was being held. I almost threw it away unopened, but after putting Emma to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and carefully slit the envelope. Marcus, it began, I don't expect forgiveness and I won't insult you with apologies, but there's something you should know. Emma was never part of the plan. She happened and she changed me. Not enough to stop what I was doing, but enough that I began to wish our life together was real. In another world, perhaps it could have been. Take care of our daughter. She deserves better than both of us. I folded the letter and put it away in my desk. Maybe someday Emma would want to read it. Maybe not. 2 years after the arrests, I testified at Richard's trial. He sat at the defense table, staring at me with cold hatred as I detailed how I'd uncovered their scheme. And at no point during your 10-year marriage did you suspect your wife's involvement? Richard's attorney asked during cross-examination. No, I said. I trusted her completely. Yet you want this jury to believe you're competent enough to have uncovered this alleged conspiracy single-handedly? I met Richard's gaze. Not single-handedly. They made a mistake. They got careless and left evidence where I could find it. Even the best liars slip eventually. Richard was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 25 years. The others received sentences ranging from 5 to 18 years. The case set precedents for prosecuting financial crimes and led to substantial reforms within the FBI's internal security protocols. I declined offers to write a book or consult on the inevitable documentaries. Instead, I took a teaching position at the academy, training new agents to spot the patterns I had missed in my own life. Emma is 10 now. She visits Elise in prison once a month. I don't go with her. Caroline's sister takes her. Caroline and I have formed an unusual friendship, bonded by shared betrayal. She moved to Arizona last year to start over. Sometimes I think about doing the same, but Emma needs stability, so we stay. Last week, Emma asked me if I still loved her mother. It's complicated, I said. I loved who I thought she was. Do you hate her for what she did? I considered the question carefully. No, I hate what she did, but hating her would take too much energy. I'd rather focus on us, on our future. Emma nodded with a wisdom beyond her years. She says she's sorry, you know, every time I visit. I'm sure she is, I said, and perhaps part of me believed it. The flash drive that started it all sits in an evidence locker somewhere. Sometimes I think about how different my life would be if I'd never found it, if I'd remained in blissful ignorance. Would that have been better? No. The truth, however painful, is always preferable to a comfortable lie. That's what I tell my students, and what I tell myself on the nights when the silence in the house feels too heavy. I'm rebuilding now, piece by piece. My life wasn't what I thought it was, but that doesn't mean it can't become something real, something honest. Some days are harder than others. Some days I almost understand why Elise did what she did, the thrill of the deception, the power of knowing things others don't. But most days I'm just grateful I found that flash drive when I did. 10 years was enough time lost to lies. The rest belongs to truth, however complicated and painful it might be.